It's my honor and pleasure to be joined by Michael Josefowicz. Hi, Michael. Thank you for. I'm really looking forward to exploring who you are and your work. We've met through Dasaratha Rama and her work with the Growing Systems of Success. And I'm just so grateful to see how beautifully you've been contributing to that space.
Oh, thank you.
So maybe you can just do a little bit of an overview as to what has brought you to the work that you're doing and
Okay.
work.
Okay, well, one of the things that people need to understand about me is that at base, I'm really a nerdy sociologist. I trained in sociology, graduated in '67. I studied theory of knowledge. I went to a good school. I went to Columbia. And that's always been my fascination since I was a kid. Basically, even when I was a little kid, what fascinated me was how do things work? How does stuff work? And specifically, how do people work? How do people think what they think? And I think the trigger for me is, why do people do such terrible things? Why is there war? Why is there genocide? Why is there bullying? I have a feeling that people are good, that basically people are all the same. They worry about their families, they worry about their kids, they worry about all the things that regular people worry about. And that's true every place on the planet. And then you look at genocides, all the genocides, Rwanda, Biafra, Germany. It just goes on. The history of the world is punctuated by genocides. So I would say for me, that's really what drives me. Basically, curiosity in people, for some reason, a theoretical framework, what might be called a philosophical framework of theory of knowledge. So that's at the base. When I retired, I needed to find something to do. And so I started killing time on Twitter, which was a lot of fun and still is fun. I met some great people on Twitter over time. I mean, I started on Twitter about 2009. And it took me about a year or so to really learn how to use it. My first tweets were just, I look back at my series of tweets in the beginning, they were totally unintelligible because I tried to pack too much into a tweet. And so I used a code that was totally clear to me, but during the time that we were tweeting, actually, I got in touch with a wonderful man in India, a fellow named Divyendu D. I don't think I've ever said it out loud. I only type it. Anyway, with him and a couple of other people, Daniel Durant, he's in Seattle someplace, or someplace in the upper Northwest, with a fellow named, I only know his Twitter name. Anyway, he's in France, he's wonderful, and a couple of other people. That's where we co-developed a theory that we call nemetics. I decided not to use the word because it's too off-putting and it seems like there's no reason really, except in very specific contexts.
What does it mean?
Well, it's a funny kind of word because first it's a made-up word because we're looking at things a little differently from the way most people are looking at things. So I needed a made-up word. Complex adaptive systems, self-organizing complexity, blah, blah, blah. They have too many connotations. So we were looking for words that had no connotations. And the only thing you really got with that is made up words. So the way meme works is it started from a little mantra. And the mantra is notice, engage, mull, exchange. And it's a mantra that I know I've been able to use very successfully. I'm a little hyper. You know, I fought bipolar my whole life, still managing it. And what it does is it slows me down.
Right.
So what you can do is, what I do is I use it really as a mantra. Notice, engage, mull, exchange. And it works. It works. Now, the reason it's important is the idea is it really is. I keep saying really is because this is what I believe. So you just put I believe in front of everything I say. Okay? So I don't have to worry about that. I believe it's a general model of education. That if you look at the problem with most educational theory is they say thinking. We want to get critical thinking. Well, what is thinking? What does that mean? And I have a long story about what thinking is the cycle of notice, engage, mull, exchange. Mull needs special focus because mull is a state of just letting it roll around your head. It is not an active state. It's an intuitive state. It's like what you do when you sleep. It's what you do when you're waiting online or when nothing else is happening. That's when you can mull.
Yes.
It's even the time in between responding to a Facebook comment. You have a moment to mull. And especially when I find something that I hadn't thought of before, I stop. And what I do in my stopping, and I know everybody in the world gives me a hard time about this, but I'm a smoker. And so what I do when I stop is I go have a cigarette. You know, I'll take a cup of coffee, go out on the porch, have a cigarette, and not even really think about not consciously think about whatever it is. And I know that the aha moments come after mulling. And you don't know how long you have to mull. Mulling ends when you have an aha moment, when you get closure.
Yes.
And you know when you have closure. It's like you just know it. You don't. So anyway, so meme is an acronym of notice, engage, mull, exchange. But in addition, it rhymes with and hopefully it brings up for me the notion of genes and memes.
Well, I was just going there for myself. I was like, okay, so a meme is really an output of meme. Like after you've had the
yes, nicely said. I hadn't thought about it that way. That's correct. A meme is an output. Well, what I'm trying to combine, which I haven't seen enough of, is the notion that every communication and indeed every object has a communicative component and a physical component. And you have to consider both at the exact same time. You can't privilege one over the other because then you won't understand how it works. For example, in a work of art, it communicates something. And the way you know about it is you feel something after you see it. You feel confused, happy, whatever it is, something is felt. But at the very, very same time, a painting is a canvas. And on top of the canvas comes pigment. And the pigment that's used is what was available in the environment. And so when they invented bright color paints, that changed painting. And so it wasn't that the consciousness first said, oh, I want to do bright color painting. What happened was the technology changed, and then you had bright color painting. And then people saw the possibilities of bright color painting, and then they did more bright color painting. And I think the same thing is true in almost every art movement. That what happens is the technology changes first. And for certain, there's leading edge, I guess you can call them avant-garde, you can call them whatever you want. But they're leading edge artists who, for whatever reason, see the possibilities in that new material. Once they make a physical product, then those possibilities are made visible to a gazillion artists. And then they could say, oh, look, I can do that. And my general principle is that people will do whatever they can do.
So can we underline for a second? So each thing has a communication component, and is it environment? What was the other part?
Physical component. The medium is the message, no fooling around.
Yes.
And so this particular technology that we're using now, right, and the way we can use it is a new thing for me. And I didn't have to conceptualize it or anything. I see it, and I immediately know how it fits into what I want to do, which is education, blah, 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 blah. And that's only because you saw the potentials first, then you put all the stuff together. But what I'm looking at, and that I could never forget, or you don't have to remember it consciously, but it's important to remember, I'm sitting at a kitchen table. I am looking at my Chromebook screen. I am, and the screen is made out of pixels. And it has a particular software today that it didn't have. You know what I'm saying, I think.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a good lens because it gives you a basis to think about how ideas change. The very fact that the internet exists now allows people to do things that they never did before, and the general principle still applies. People will do whatever they can do. They will just, because that's what people are, and there's a gazillion people, and so there will be some people who will do it faster. Some people are early adopters of the iPhone. Once other people saw what an iPhone could do, then it went mass. And now cell phones have changed the world in a way that nothing else ever has. I mean, having a computer in your pocket, and it's the reason why cell phones, everybody I talk to in Africa basically types everything on a cell phone. Can you imagine?
Amazing.
It blows me away when I find that out. So that's what you need to know about. Oh, the other thing you need to know about me is that I was an activist during the 60s.
Yeah, you were. Thank you.
Yes, I was very active, as a matter of fact. But what that means is that the problem of racism is a very big deal in my heart. It really is. I really feel that once America gets over its racism, life will be much, much better for everybody. And it's not just, one part of it is that it sucks for anybody to be the subject of racist communication. That's terrible. That's not real. I mean, that's an element, but the way I come at it is it's a critical fault line in America, so that America will never really be everything it can be until racism becomes something of the past.
Yes.
And racism is very, very deep. And I don't use racism in a pejorative way. I use it in an analytic way.
Yes.
So if I say that there's a core of Trump supporters that are racist, then that's a description. It's not yelling at them. It's just because they are. I mean, I would also make an argument that a lot of the liberal stuff that goes on is basically racist also. It treats other people as objects. And
Yeah.
so that really is those are the two things I think that are most important to know about me.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
So I'd really love to dive into the work you're doing now, but before that, I want to put a pin in this.
Okay.
Your knowledge and interest in knowledge systems and in that piece of
Yeah, I would call it the philosophy of knowledge, or the sociology. No, the sociology of knowledge. That is the accurate term from my point of view. Okay.
I would love to have a deeper dive in terms of that between us. Not today, but to put a pin in that for something that I think would be very exciting.
All right. Well, I can talk about that and love to talk about that as long as you want.
Wonderful.
I can really go on and on about that. I drive my family nuts.
Perfect.
Because it doesn't, it doesn't really fit into everyday life, and it can get a little tiresome for people. But I've learned very important skill.
Well, for me, part of what I'm looking to do is to deeply consider the order of operations in knowledge dissemination. Because
oh, cool. Yeah. No, I'm all about that. Yeah. I can
so,
give. Yeah, I have a long, boring story about that.
I'm sure it's not so boring.
Well, I'm just going by my family's judgment.
Well, they hear you over and over, but
Poor
there's
babies.
many people.
Poor babies.
But there's many people who would be fascinated by really doing a deep dive. So I'm stoked to do that at some point. And
whenever, wherever.
So we'll get into that in a small way right now in terms of the work that you're really focusing on now.
Okay.
So I'll just invite you to jump in.
Okay. For a very long time, I've had, very long time, about 10 years or so. It comes from the printing business. I've seen the possibilities of internet-connected digital printing. It's like the industry has been talking about this for 10 years. So this is not a big deal. But the thing that it enables is what's already enabled with with Jonas in Malawi, which is we could, a designer in Portugal did a design. No, Jonas and I worked together on what kind of posters would work in his village.
Right.
We then wrote a design brief. We then decided, how do we know it succeeded?
Right.
Then, so with the design brief, I took that onto Twitter and shared it with some of my printing friends, told them I'm looking for a designer. They went through their networks, connected me on Twitter with this wonderful, I assume he's a young man. I have to be very careful about saying kid, because for me, anybody under the age of 50 is a kid. So I'll stay away from that.
Yay, I'm still a kid for a couple of years.
Oh, you're definitely a kid. Are you kidding? Hush. It doesn't matter, but you're definitely a kid. At any rate, this designer in Portugal read the design brief, said, oh, I would love to do that. That's a great project. 3 days later, we had these incredible PDF posters designed. About a week after that, I had them printed in New York, and he had them printed in Malawi in the village. So that's cool, right? That's cool.
Awesome.
Awesome, I agree. So the way the potential I see goes to what I was talking about racism, which is, I think there's a practical way for the story of Africa being told by Africans, not by Europeans. I want the story of, I want to bring the voice of Africans to the United States. That's the deal. And the reason that's important to me is the objectification of Africa. There's still this incredible meme of Africa as the dark continent, which is just ridiculous in a lot of ways. One is it's morally ridiculous, but the other way is that Africa has an enormous amount of arable land. Going forward, after the Chinese and after China and India, the next driver of the world economy is going to be Africa. And the Chinese understand this because they are now ferociously moving through Africa, buying every piece of land they can because they got to feed their people. And they understand that Africa is about food. Now, the other part of Africa that I want people to know about is the incredible rich history. And, you know, there's this notion that it was uncivilized until the Europeans came. Bullshit. They have this incredible history that goes back so many thousands of years, starting from Egypt and going through Central Africa and then West Africa, and Southern Africa. It's like a whole, okay, if you're really curious about people, nothing will satisfy that curiosity more than learning about African history. It's just,
can I just jump in with a little interjection? One of the things that I'm profoundly motivated to learn more about is ancient knowledge.
Yes, it's the best, right?
So in the 54 countries of the African continent, there are many, many, many more family groups and languages that have that knowledge encoded. And I just want to put in there, being here on Turtle Island in North America.
Where's Turtle Island? Is that near Seattle or something?
No, Turtle Island is the whole of North America.
Oh, cool. I never heard that term. Okay.
It's another name for North America.
That's nice.
Yeah, I have a lot of passion around the understanding the story of the genocide that's happened on the lands that we're on in terms of Indigenous people. And I think that that's a really important story to hear from the Indigenous nations.
Yes.
And that all over the world, Indigenous knowledge is what can help us to transition, because and knowing that gives us ancient tools of knowing and being. So I just wanted to include that piece.
Yes, that's very much where I'm at. I mean, and recently I found out from Okezi, who's my guy in Nigeria, right? A thing that really blew me away. It turns out he's from the Igbo people. I never heard of the Igbo people. The Igbo, as is pretty obvious, and I've said it many times, I'm a secular Jew. I'm also second generation. So my parents lived through the genocide in Europe, and I came here after that. So genocide is very present in my life. This is not some abstract concept, right? So it turns out, I found out about 2 weeks ago, that the Igbo nation has a culture. They consider themselves a lost tribe of Israel. Yep. And they maintain many of the rituals that I've seen in synagogues since I was a kid.
Wow, I have full body chills.
So did I. Is that the craziest thing in the world? I couldn't believe it. And the other part of it is they went through their own genocide in the 1970s. If I remember the numbers correctly, 3 million Igbos were killed during the conflicts in Nigeria. And so now I'm in a position I couldn't imagine in a million years, which is my collaborator in Nigeria is first generation because he was very close to that time, 1970. day before
Okay.
yesterday. And my parents were first generation. And I'm quite positive that there are certain things that are contextually agnostic that go across history of
Yes.
what it means to be first, second, or third generation from a genocide.
Absolutely.
You know, and so it's interesting that you're interested in the genocide of Indian people, Native people here in the States, because that's another place that we overlap.
Yeah, I mean, I'm non-Indigenous, but I feel that it's just what we don't recognize the genocide. Like, even though the Truth and Reconciliation Committee,
Nobody talks about it.
no, and it's ongoing. And so as a
Okay.
awake person and as an ally to Indigenous people, I just feel that we need to tell that story differently from the voices of the people with support
Yes.
from
Okay.
allies.
So we're okay. Very, very similar. The hard part, I'm also sort of a political junkie, which you may know or may not know, but
I see little glimmers.
yeah, okay. I'm a total political junkie and, you know, and involved in it, think a lot and read a lot about the history of America. America was based on free land by the genocide of Native people, and it was based on slavery, free labor on Black slaves, African immigrants.
Yes.
Now it turns out, just to make the world even more interesting, that a lot of those Black slaves came from Igbo land. They're Igbos.
Wow.
Oh, it gets better, gets better. In fact, the Igbos, my friend Okezi was telling me that there was a shipment of Igbo people early on, 17 something or other. And as the ship came into the harbor, the leader of this group, they all decided that they would rather commit suicide by drowning than be slaves. Then there's another story he told me that in the 1920s, you'll love this one. In the 1920s, the women, Igbo women, led a really powerful movement against the British colonialists. So this goes back, it's just great. It's just, it goes on and
The
on.
power of the people. And I mean, it's heartbreaking and terrifying to hear those stories. And
Yep,
it's important for us to not turn our eyes.
exactly. And I'll tell you the truth. One of the things that I think is that we get a lot better stance on what it means for America if we can, for a moment, lay aside the horror, lay aside the grief, lay aside the shame, and just look at this from some kind of objective point. I mean, an example, the fact that there was slavery in the South gave the merchants of Manchester cheap, continuous cotton. They made their big profits from cotton, right? And then they took those profits and they invested them into the railroads. So there's a wonderful book, I forget, Empire of Cotton, which describes this in great detail, but it is literally true, not metaphorically true, that the Industrial Revolution was powered by Black slaves and powered by the genocide of Native people because we had free land. So imagine, America was born with free land and free labor. I don't know any other country in history that had that combination.
And Michael, this is the core of our challenges today. We can draw a direct line
I
because
agree.
and so it is very, very important for us to look at how labor is done now and how ownership of land is done now, and in fact flip that system. We need to,
And,
yeah.
and also, to understand anything about American politics, you have to understand slavery. That is the fault line that goes through American politics since the country was founded. And I don't know whether you stop me if this is not appropriate, but the thing about Trumpism is that he is now making explicit what has been implicit for at least, well, since the Republic was founded. Every once in a while it becomes explicit. And that's actually a good thing, because once it's explicit, you can do stuff about it. As long as it remains implicit, it's like, so.
Yes. So it rises it to the surface so that we can actually talk about it.
That's correct. That's a nice way of saying it. It rises to the surface so we can talk about it. Yep.
So let's look at our current, I just want to put a couple of ideas in there that I've been really deeply considering.
Please.
Which is around.
Am I allowed to eat my lunch?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. I'm just going to mute you so that you're not, there we go. I've just muted you so that the sounds aren't coming across the screen. So if I feel into our modern form of slavery, it's the corporation. Corporate bodies are really harvesting the labor and work of us, of people. And I mean, this is broad strokes and just one way to look at it, but this is part of my thinking.
Okay, you may see an expression on my face when you said that.
Yes.
And it's a much, much longer conversation.
Of course.
Which I don't think is appropriate to get into now.
Fair enough.
I think capitalism is the greatest liberating force in human history. Oh my God, what did he say? There's one book that describes it well. It's called Marx's Revenge. I'll send you a link or something if you're interested. It's pretty nerdy. But what the basic story is that capitalism's internal contradictions get to a place. Remember how old Karl Marx said that capitalism will wither away?
No.
I don't know if you know. Okay, he did say that. And then all the communists took Marx and made him a banner instead of an analysis. He was in economics. He wasn't a revolutionary. And said that they are the embodiment of it and that it's going to wither away the day after tomorrow. No, it will wither. Well, now I'm getting into discussion, but let me, as you say, let me put the pin in and we'll go back to that sometime. I'm really a contrarian.
That's great. And it's a very important to have the choir speak to itself is not so useful. To be able to find the points of complementarity and contention between divergent thinkers, that's where the answer is, right? So
I agree.
So I'm totally up for it. But allow me to go with where I was going,
sure.
Which is in this time, as I see it, we have a system of economy that's based on extracting both resources, both human and physical, and that we have an opportunity to completely rethink how we do the economy, and how it's progressed has not been thoughtfully created by us, but rather a series of drivers that has kind of wended its way to where we are now. I personally think that taking the opportunity to deeply consider all of the component parts and to co-design systems that can be of benefit to all of us. And like you were saying about Trumpism, take the implicit and make it explicit. We can now bring that to light and have a conversation about what can actually work.
Okay. How should I say this?
Contrarianism?
It's not really contrarianism. I can make the argument. Well, maybe it is. I don't know. In my real life, they call it pain in the assism. What I see is that capitalism is doing that by itself. And that the change in our consciousness, exactly the things that you say, and that I believe the only place where we're a little different, I think, is I believe that this goes back to people do what they can do.
Yes.
Okay. And then how consciousness comes off of that. I believe that one of the reasons there is such an obvious growing consciousness of your attitude is because capitalism is actually inevitably moving towards exactly what you're talking about. So it's actually very, very good news. Most people think I'm a rose-colored delusionalist optimist. That is to be determined.
We'll see. We'll see. I think we need hope, Michael.
Oh, my attitude is I'm relatively pessimistic in the short run and wildly optimistic in the long run. I have gotten into such arguments about climate change is going to end the world and about how we're all going to run out of food and there's going to be too much population and we don't have enough resources. I could use natural language to describe what I think of that, but in this context, let me just say that's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. People are not looking at this the right way, I think.
Agreed. And so again, to that meta conversation of order of operations, of knowledge to take us in the right direction. So what I'm excited about in terms of you and what I witness and sense your mind works is to deeply consider in those places.
Come on in. Nobody else has the courage. In my family, they call it opening a can of grandpa.
Yes.
So when I start to go off on my various rants and images and blah, 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 they say, uh-oh, he opened a can of grandpa.
That's fantastic. I kind of want to call this segment that.
Go right ahead. Call it whatever you want. I am the thing that gives me, I'm sure you've talked, are you a grandparent by any chance? No, too young. Yeah. Have you ever, any grandparent will tell you that being a grandparent, that's the payoff. You know how you work your butt off, working for a living, worrying about your kids. Are they going to go to school? Are they going to be happy? Are they going to be healthy? Yeah. All of that pays off once you have the grandkid. That's why grandparents are so nuts about their grandkids. So,
yes, of course.
So calling it open a can of grandpa, I think would be perfect. I love that.
Okay. So I'd love to, we'll wrap up in the next few minutes, but what I'd love to know from you right now is what do you need to help to progress the projects that you're really focusing on, and how can people see your work? So how can people engage? How can they participate?
Okay. Well, one way is what we did today. This is an extraordinary tool and moves me about 6 steps closer to understanding how education can work in Africa. It's very powerful. I'm really blown away by the features you outlined. So that's by itself. How can people help? Good question.
So
it's a good question.
Yeah, specifically
Yes,
printing, like are there needs on the ground in Africa, for example, that
not printing equipment. The what's necessary is the formation of high performance teams, no matter where they are. To the extent I am so convinced that printing adds, I tend to be convinced of stuff. Uh, I have strong opinions.
no.
I don't know if you could tell that I have, I'm convinced that once people use it, they will see the value of print. No question about it. Because I spent my whole life doing that. I've seen what it does. Once people understand how cheap it can be using digital printing, my whole project with Malawi was an out-of-pocket expense of $35.
Wow.
Not bad, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
It took like 2 weeks total from beginning to end, and it cost $35. Anybody can replicate that. Anybody.
Yes.
And so what helps me is identifying high performance teams on the ground who have clear micro projects with clear success criteria. Because if you don't have that, you can't really help. You can't do anything. You keep asking people, well, what do you want to happen? And it's amazing how hard it is to get that information. It's really fascinating to me how hard it is to get people to be able to define success criteria.
Right.
And once you have a team, and once you have a success criteria, the rest, no kidding, the rest of it is relatively easy from my experience. So
And
that's the kind of thing.
I'd like to know a little bit more about high performance teams and about your definition of micro projects.
Okay, a high performance team is one in which communication is smooth and easy. That's the critical factor. And one of the things that importantly means no guilt, no blame, no shame. Don't feel bad when you can't make a deadline. Just make sure you tell the rest of the team early enough that you can't make a deadline. This is not atomic physics. It mostly just comes down to being a mensch and being there, being honest. If you can't be there, leave. Don't, it's like sitting in a classroom when you really don't want to be in a classroom. You'd be much better off just leaving the classroom if you don't want to be there. And what a high performance team needs is that everybody who's there is really there.
Yes.
No dead wood. I don't want dead wood at all. But the other side of that, it's actually very kind, because what it says is if you don't want to be there for any reason, don't be there. Go do what you need to do. So that's, in a nutshell, that's a high performance team. And then there's a whole bunch of blah, 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 blah. Micro project is, first of all, doable with the resources at hand.
Yes.
So if you have a project where you have to go fundraise $10,000 and blah, 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 who cares? You're going to spend all your time fundraising. And, I've seen so many people just spend all their time worrying about they don't have enough money to do X, Y, or Z. Well, if you don't have enough money, then figure out what you can do with the money you have. And then if things are good, and you play it right, then you'll get more money on the basis of what you've already done. I think the whole fundraising thing is mostly a waste of time.
Right.
Okay. And the other thing about a micro project is you have to have clear success criteria. How do you know you did it right? Now, the important reason for having a success criteria is even more than how you did it right. is why did you do it wrong? So that
Mhm.
if you have clear success criteria and it didn't happen, then you have the opportunity to reflect and you can say, okay, well, why didn't it happen? Well, it didn't happen because we didn't take this into account. It didn't happen because we had somebody got sick. It didn't happen because people didn't stick with it. There's a million reasons.
Yes.
But when you analyze those reasons and you have a team that can maintain that institutional knowledge, then you improve.
Yes.
You improve much more from failure than success.
Yes.
Because success hides. First of all, if you succeed, nobody wants to look backwards because why should you? You succeeded, right? But success hides what you could have made more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue is not merely you want to get more and more capacity to be more and more efficient with every new project.
Yes.
Otherwise, you keep reinventing wheels and you never learn anything.
Right.
So that's my little story.
Awesome.
And I'm sticking to it.
Awesome. And so it is really, again, building on this knowledge piece, this piece about how we, and I like what I hear between your words is about living knowledge.
Yes. It's all embedded. That's why it's a meme, because there's a physical, it goes to people in general, right? Because a lot of people live in their brains. Usually, from what I've seen, usually men. But in fact, your brain is in your body. It's all of a piece. If you want to make your brain better, breathe deeply and get out of your head. You want to make your brain better, make a piece of art. Go for a walk. Talk to your children. You know, and so people miss the mind. There's a whole thing about the mind-body connection, you know, and what's mind and what's body. And I think, in my opinionated way, which you've already learned, it's a false dichotomy. What are you talking about? There is no mind without a body. There is no body without a mind. Please. And so, yes, exactly as you say.
So are there any websites that people could look at to get a deeper sense of your work, or that
No.
you direct people to? Okay.
No, I'm not selling anything. I'm not building. No. What I mean is, no, I don't mean selling in a bad way. You're talking to a man who spent 35 years selling. So I got no problem with selling. I know a lot of other people do. I don't. And also I am moderately ADHD. So it'd be very hard. It would be impossible for me to do what Rama is doing. Even if I wanted to do it, it is inconceivable that I have that kind of patience, intelligence, and skill to do what she does. She blows me away every morning that I see she posts something else. It's just, I never knew anybody like her.
She's an amazing orchestrator. It's
amazing.
Yes.
Amazing. God bless her. I mean, and I think really without her, none of this would be happening.
Yes.
She really demonstrates her skill.
Yes.
And this is all a long story to say why I don't have a website.
You do you, Michael. You're doing it beautifully. You know,
that's all
we all have our parts and pieces.
At this stage of life, the other part of being retired is that I have the freedom to do, to act what I would call act authentically. Yes. Which basically means, I mean, thank God I'm comfortably enough retired. My IRA is good enough that I don't have to, I live small, but I don't have to worry too much about where the next dollar is coming in. Mm-hmm. And so, blessedly, I have the freedom to do what I want, when I want. And, you know, within the constraints of chores that have to be done. I mean, I always do chores and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I will continue doing what I do, whether I couldn't do anything else.
Yes, yes. Well, it's been a real honor to connect with you. And
Oh, I don't know about honor, but it sure was fun meeting you.
yes, well, it is for me. And
Thank you for the kind words.
Yeah, I very much appreciate um, people like you that are just putting your oar in and you're doing the best that you can to help the people you can as you
That's all it is. It's plain. It really is. I don't think anybody, I assume retired people understand it better, because one of the great needs for a retired person is to feel that they're still making a difference. That's a very, very deep need to make it. I mean, a lot of retired people just sort of walk around and play golf and they don't know what to do and blah, 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 blah. But if people feel like they're making even a tiny little difference, it makes their lives a lot better.
Exactly. It's a reason for being.
Don't you think?
Yes.
There you go. All right, so I think we have lots of synergy. What do you think?
Yes, I do. I'm really looking forward to future conversations. And I just,
Great, me too.
awesome. Yeah.
Okay, great.
So we'll bring this to a close and we'll have a little checkout. So thank you.
Okay, what do we do? Thank you.
Yes, you're great.
Oh, you made my day. Now I'm going to go smoke cigarettes.